Great to have you along today, and we're joined on the program by Alex Wilkes. Alex has been with us before. He's the Senior VP of America Rising. Alex, I am 72 years old, and in those 7+ decades, I cannot remember an instance when we had more threat to our freedoms and liberties that are now posed by the socialist Marxists who call themselves Democrats. This is a truly frightening state of affairs we find ourselves in.
And not just frightening for your generation, but for my generation as well, since we'll be the ones picking up the tab for all of these plans.
Exactly.
There's no plan to pay for them.
No, you're right. Eventually the waiter shows up with a check, right?
Well, and that's what's really scary about this Democratic 2020 primary that's been unfolding for the last 2 years or so, is that these candidates are all trying to avoid what happened to Hillary Clinton in 2016, which is that she was sort of caught off guard by this very liberal, progressive base that supported Bernie Sanders. They felt like Clinton was not sufficiently progressive enough. And I think that it really ended up costing her credibility and votes in the general election as a result. So after 2016, we saw candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Kirsten Gillibrand moving themselves all the way over to the left to try to beat that rap, if you will. And in doing so, they are running up quite the tab on the taxpayers' back. And so we can only hope and pray that they don't actually get to affect these crazy schemes.
Yeah, God forbid, because between the Green New Deal and all the other wacko left-wing proposals that we're hearing from these people, and it's one crazy spending scheme after another, we're talking another $40, $50, $60 trillion in debt to be able to fund these programs. It's ridiculous.
It's completely ridiculous, and I think it really just shows how far left the Democratic Party has moved. I think that, though, what's good for our cause is that once people are shown what the effects of these programs will be, they're all of a sudden not feeling so rosy about them. A good example of this was this week on the CNN town hall where Kamala Harris was asked about Medicaid for all, and we hear that term. Or Medicare for all, we hear that term tossed around a lot, right? We've heard this from Bernie Sanders. We hear this, just sort of like being, very casually adopted by all of these newcomers into the party. And when Jake Tapper, I thought very smartly followed up and said, well, so you're for banning all private insurance. And
right.
She was like, yeah, we need to get rid of it. Let's move on.
And of course, she was forced to cave and walk that back the very next day when somebody explained to her that these very same private healthcare providers also make campaign contributions, and she had just cut off any possible contributions from them to her campaign. And she said, oh, wait a second, I didn't mean that way.
Well, sure, and it's not just the campaign contributions that they're worried about. What they see are the same polls that we read, which is that when people are aware of the fact that Medicare for all means a lot of people in the polling think that Medicare for all is an optional thing, meaning that if people wanted to opt into the Medicare system under this plan, they could do so, but that they could also retain private insurance should they choose to do so. Once they realize that that's not an option anymore and that the government is taking charge of all services and all plans, the support for these plans craters because everyone wants to keep, they want to keep their doctor. They want
right.
to keep they want to keep the status quo, with respect to their health, care, relatively the same, although we would all like to pay a little bit less, and there are certainly some good free market alternatives to help us do that. People, when they feel like their very health is being messed with, I think that's a very scary thing, and Democrats know that that's bad news for them in the polls.
Yeah, I found it fascinating. And I refer to what the Democrats are proposing not as Medicare for all. I refer to it as Medicaid for all, which I think is a lot closer to what it actually would be. There was a Kaiser Family Foundation survey, Alex, that was released this week that found a majority of Americans support a government-run, single-payer Medicare for all healthcare system until they found out what it would cost them, and then suddenly they had a massive change of heart.
Well, that's exactly what we see here, is that once people figure out what exactly this is going to cost them, either in terms of the quality of care or the dollars out of their pocketbook, they start to say, wait a second.
Right.
Maybe there were some good intentions behind this plan. Certainly we would like to see everybody have access to good health care, but I don't want to, to give up, access to my health care, my family's health care, and to pay out, ridiculous sums in order to achieve this. So, I think that's where the Democrats, they're sort of like in this la-la land right now, where they're making all of these promises to try to appeal to the leftmost base of the party, and then they're going to have to reconcile that with very real facts, in just a few short months.
Yeah, and we've been down this road already with Obamacare. State of the Union address originally scheduled for Tuesday of this week, and now will be Tuesday of next week. What would you like to see President Trump say in his State of the Union address, Alex?
So I would actually like to see the president put some of these Democrats in moderate swing districts, these Democrats who won in the last election.
Right.
I'd like to see him sort of put a bargain in front of them that will be hard to refuse. A good example of somewhere where he could do this is on a topic like infrastructure. This is something that Democrats go around all campaign season talking about.
Yep.
And if the president, who's shown a great willingness to negotiate on this issue, comes forward with some plans, and then these Democrats have to choose between sort of standing in lockstep behind Nancy Pelosi, who's going to oppose everything, or actually working for what their constituents want them to do. I think it's going to put them in a real bind, and I would hope to see, not only a proposal like that, but also some unity from the president. This is, a difficult time in American politics. Certainly everyone feels the strain of the polarization out there.
Sure.
And I think that the State of the Union is always a good opportunity to remind us of what unites us as Americans.
We're talking with Alex Wilkes. Alex is the Senior VP of America Rising. I think at the very least, Alex, it's going to be worth the price of admission to watch Ms. Botox have to sit there on the podium behind the president while he recites and recounts all of the accomplishments of the first 2 years in office. I think it'll be amusing to watch her squirm a bit.
Oh, sure. And, I think that the one thing that he might be able to do that he wasn't able to do, recently was, or at least with as big of an audience, is to talk about a potential fix for the border. A few weeks ago, the president had offered DACA in exchange for border security funding.
Right.
That's a very popular compromise with the American people. The American people like DACA. They like border security. The two of them together, it's a winner. And I think that, through all the noise, they maybe didn't get that message and the government shutdown. But now, the government's open. The president has come to the table in good faith, said, okay, you said you're not going to negotiate until you open up the government. We've opened up the government. Here's what I have to say. He now has an opportunity to make that case to the American people directly on a really big stage. And I think that, the Democrats are going to have more than a no as a response.
Yeah, I think that's a very intelligent suggestion, Alex, to be able to do what we can to splinter the Democrat Party even further, because obviously Nancy Pelosi has got her hands full herding cats with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the two other freshman women, the Muslim representatives who are new members of Congress. They're about as far left radical as you could possibly get. So if we could splinter them further with the moderate Democrats, if they even exist, that might contribute to some more divisiveness within their own party.
And there are plenty of opportunities to do so, because these Democrats, after the election and throughout this government shutdown, I think they've put on a good face saying, we're united in opposition to the Trump administration. Well, you have some of these Democrats who are coming from districts that the president won in 2016,
right.
Many of those districts that he'll win again in just 2 short years. And they're saying to themselves, I got to find something to work with this White House on, or the voters are going to can me in the next election. On the other hand, as you mentioned, Nancy Pelosi has these newer members of the caucus who are decidedly more to the left than really the caucus has been in some time.
Right.
And they're starting to wade into issues that are very, very unpopular borderline, on the borderline of anti-Semitism in some cases.
Yes.
With some of the groups and the people with whom they've been associated with. And I think that that's going to put her in really uncomfortable territory. So I think that it's been a good show for this first part of the year. But once people start considering, their own futures, they might start to, that unity might start to break down.
We can but hope. Alex, thanks for your time as always. We look forward to the State of the Union and seeing the president make the case for his agenda next Tuesday night. Alex Wilkes, Senior VP of America Rising. Always good to talk to you, Alex. Talk to you again soon.